Hello everyone, and welcome back to another video. In this particular video, I will be placing an analysis on the basis of the stance of power. Now, where might we find a stance of power as people? Would you find a stance of power from your external body? Would you find a source of power from your internal body? And would you find a source of power from a higher body of sorts? For one, we could actively see that in the expression of power, whether that be through fashion or fitness, health, and artistic displays, we might find a representation or a manifestation of power, an investment in order to acquire a certain particular appearance, which in said appearance, we as humans find a sense of identity, a power within. Within said identity, imagine now that the broader one was to create the appearance, whether that be through the use of artistical, simple displays that create not just a widening or just a narrowing of the light portions that are displayed upon the skin, such as a tattoo. You could actively alter the perception at which your body is seen through the placements of tattoos, and this gives optical illusions. Another way we can actively see this is in the act of getting fit. The moment you establish a broader frame to yourself within physical body, you then take on a stance of power. You are of a powerful nature, physically. And then when you also now dive into the idea of fashion, look at suits. They create a broader stance upon your shoulders, whether that be for men or women. Because the moment you acquire a stance of broader appearance, you take up more space horizontally, and you are a vertical being, which now the broader you are within said environment, you are seen as a more dominant presence. And if we were to then combine all of these aspects, you find a rather deep power behind said broadening of self. But in the idea of broadening of self, I will invite you into a story, such as behind the notion of simply fashion. And this is the story of a great man that which I came to know over the last few years. And this man came from the country of Chile. And within said country, he grew up extremely poor. Chile is very poor at the time when he was growing up. And every day he worked, did what he could, whatever it could be, in order to essentially save enough money, because every day he would walk by the same store, a men's tailoring store. And within said store, they would create beautiful blazers, beautiful jackets. And within said store, he pictured himself in one day. At the age of 19, he told himself, one day I will have one of these jackets. And that was the first thing he thought about buying after saving enough money for himself. He was living on the streets at this particular point. Didn't have a roof over his head, but the first thing he could think of was to buy himself a suit jacket. And the moment he walked out of that store with that said suit jacket, he accidentally bumped into a businessman who happened to work at a bank. And out of this came the opportunity of his life. he would begin working as an intern bank teller, and through his mathematical understanding of patterns and numbers, he came to understand basic financing rather quickly. He studied as hard as he could in school because he wanted to succeed. And even working as a bank teller for 9 years, he would also go to school at night, working during the day as a bank teller and studying at night in order to take on and get promoted. Until one day, this man became just about the CEO of said bank. And this is a real story that happened based on one man showing where he could get his power from. A stance of power. And this man's name is Mauricio. And Mauricio has a beautiful family. And it shows in their valor, their value, that this man's hard work to reinvent himself was what gave them the ability to essentially have a love in their home, by showing to not just himself, but his wife, his daughter, his son, and his grandchildren, that a man can reinvent himself at any particular time. And even while having already undergone such a hard life story, to get to the place of a CEO-like state, handling business deals of hundreds of millions of dollars in Chilean real estate and government developments, from nothing came this tremendous potential. The moment he decided he was going to take a broader approach to himself, taking on a stance of power, dedicating his values to obtaining a goal. And from said goal, his life began in the direction and the trajectory that he would forever want it to be. Until it came to be that in being a person of power, now within said Chile, came danger to his family. And the admittance and emergence of saving said family, this man would find himself to have to once again begin anew and reinvent himself, and seeking refuge not just for him but for his family within Canada, where even as said man of business and power within Chile, this man was then told, entering Canada, you must reinvent yourself once more and begin from nothing. Most people at this particular time would have given up. But this man chose to move forward, and he didn't give up, and he took on a greater power. And in said power is a lot of faith, and that is when Mauricio discovered essentially a higher power beyond all of us. Why might I be sharing said story? Because this occurs not just to said man, it occurs to a woman as well, where now even mothers come to reinvent themselves. And in the stance of power, Why might a first world country not recognize a third world country's education? Because see, if a third world country's education was just as valid as a first world country's, we would actively see that these individuals would be welcome to take on and create tremendously exponential ways of thinking within new legislations, within new ways of approach towards not just civilization, the education system, the way we control and use our resources. From all different types of the world are people that are extremely educated. And the moment they enter a first world country, they are specifically told, your education is not valid any longer. And unless if you're going to re-educate yourself within our system, you will not be working within said field anymore. And you will be a trade worker from said point if you get a job in trades or work a minimum wage job. Now, in the understanding that the liberal government wishes to preach about equality, to a certain point, the idea regarding beginning from scratch seems a bit harsh for individuals that themselves are coming to start from scratch with nothing to begin with. And they themselves had tremendous opportunity within their countries. And as a multicultural nation, would you not say that Canada should support the idea of recognizing education from altered or different countries? Because if we cannot recognize another country's education, meanwhile their actual average of intelligence per IQ per capita, according to certain different places, of course varying by the education system of said countries, we would find that there is a much higher IQ per capita in non-first world countries. Why might that be? Because it would require real life experience in order to apply said learned studies. Real life experience of survival, applying all of these different factors. And now we might argue, why should we have a difference in survivability within different countries? It's the 21st century, it's 2026. How is it that in our present day and age, there's not an equal redistribution of said wealth? Well, where does the wealth go? That would be a question for the bank, wouldn't it? But I'm not going to dive too far into the power of stance and where this stance on power delves. But in understanding the basis of reinventing oneself, at which potential rate can you as a particular person take on a greater path in life the moment you set a goal, a motion to move forward? And no matter how far or how uneasy life is, you must still find ways to move forward. It's not about how hard you can hit in life. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. And so in that saying, I would like to personally thank this man I will remain your last name anonymous out of respect. But truly, from the bottom of my heart, thank you to you and your family, Mauricio, for showing, not just to me, but to the world, that there is a tremendous power behind the human faith and the stance of power from a higher stance. God takes and God gives back 10 times fold. Thank you.